made Americans less safe? Yes or no?
Senator, we are dedicated to the safety
Has
and
the crisis made Americans less safe? I don't want a discourse. It's a yes or no question.
Senator, we have a challenge of
You refuse to answer the question. Mr. Secretary, let me show you how someone doing his job answers a question in a straightforward manner. Chief Ortiz, is the crisis that is currently ongoing at the southern border making the border less safe for Americans and aliens alike? Answer, yes. One word, one syllable, 3 letters. That's how someone answers a question and does their job. You're being a politician misleading the American people. Let me give you a chance again. Will you show the same integrity Chief Ortiz shows? Is the crisis at the southern border making Americans less safe? Yes or no?
Senator, we have 260,000.
You refuse to answer the question. Let's move on.
And security of the
Next question, Mr. Mayorkas. Has the crisis made aliens less safe? Yes or no?
Senator, we are seeking.
So you won't answer that question either. It's a yes or no. Has it made aliens less safe?
Senator, smugglers are exploiting.
Has the crisis made aliens, less safe? Are you willing to answer it?
Senator, the smuggling organizations.
Okay, you're filibustering again. Let me ask you this question. How many migrants have died under President Biden?
Senator, your phrasing of the question is actually quite misleading.
How many migrants died in 2022?
Approaching our southern border?
Yes.
Precisely why we are seeking to exclude the smuggling.
Do you know the answer? Do you know how many died?
I do not.
You do not. Of course you don't. I know how many died. 853.
That is
853. And by the way, here are the numbers that have died every year. You go back to 1998, you see it's consistently between 300 and 400, 300, 400, 300, 400. Suddenly, 2021, what happens? You get in office, and that red line are dead bodies. I've been on the Rio Grande, and I've seen dead bodies floating there who've drowned because of your refusal to do your job. You don't even know how many have died. What do you say to the Texas farmers and ranchers who find pregnant ladies dead on their property, who find toddlers dead on their property? What do you say to them?
I say that is why precisely we are taking it to the smuggling organizations.
But you are not. That is simply not true.
Number two, it is why we are dedicated.
Let me read from the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal 2 weeks ago ran an article entitled, "It's like a graveyard. Record numbers of migrants are dying at the border." The story begins with this chilling line, quote, Eagle Pass, Texas. Local officials keep a refrigerated truck to hold the bodies of migrants who drown in the currents of the Rio Grande while trying to cross the border into the U.S. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that this article be entered into the record. Let me ask you a different question. How many children have been sexually assaulted by human traffickers under the Biden administration?
Senator, this is precisely why we instituted.
I don't want a lecture. It's a question. How many children have been sexually assaulted by human traffickers under your administration?
Senator, this is exactly why on January 5th we announced
again,
the parole
do you know
program.
how many? Do you know how many children have been sexually assaulted?
This is why we.
Okay, you're going to refuse to answer that question as well. Let's move on. It's obvious you've been instructed to stonewall, so I'm not going to let you. You don't get to stonewall and filibuster. Now, one of my Democratic colleagues before said the Democrat talking point, quote, "This problem didn't start under Biden." Look, I get if you're a partisan spinner, you got to figure out something to say about the absolute catastrophe that has played out under the Biden administration. True or false, Secretary Mayorkas, 2020 was the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. Is that true or false?
It is certainly the lowest level of immigration in many, many years. And what was it in 2020? What was it, Senator, in 2020 that impacted the entire world, including the United States?
Okay, so your testimony is the reason we had the lowest rate was COVID. It had nothing to do with building the wall, nothing to do with any catch and release, nothing to do with Remain in Mexico. With all respect, Mr. Secretary, that answer is laughable. And in fact, if you look at illegal immigration, let's look at CBP encounters. You can see 500,000, 500,000. It drops to the lowest level, and boom, what happens? You show up. And that red line is you. That red line is Joe Biden. And you're claiming nothing happened. Oh, gosh, this was here before us. No, you made the decision to allow this to happen. Let me ask you, we now have over 5.5 million people who've entered this country illegally under Joe Biden. How many murderers have you released into America?
Senator, I'm not aware of any murderer whom we've
So you don't know?
Senator, let me say something.
Do you know?
If you take a look at...
No, you don't get to give a speech. Do you know how many murderers you've released?
I'm just trying to answer your question.
How many rapists
Senator.
have you released?
Senator, I'm trying to answer your question.
You can answer, I know or I don't know.
Senator, any individual who poses a public safety threat...
How many child molesters have you released?
...and removed into the United States, from the United States.
Oh, so your testimony under oath, subject to perjury, is that you have not released any murderers, rapists, or child molesters among the 5.5 million? Is that your testimony?
Mr. Chairman, may I have the opportunity
No, you may not. You may answer my question.
You're not
Is that your testimony, yes or no?
Senator, you're not allowing me to answer your question.
I am allowing you to answer. I'm not allowing you to filibuster.
If you take a look at the pace of immigration in 2018 to 2019...
You're refusing to answer. Let's move on. Let's move on to gotaways. Gotaways are the people that get away that you know about. Now, what happened under your administration? Gotaways consistently down at this low line. Boom, you get in. And they go from below 180,000 to 600,000. Now, I'll tell you this about a gotaway. You don't know, among those 600,000 a year, you have no idea how many are murderers, correct?
That is precisely why the number of gotaways...
Do you know how many of those are murderers?
That is precisely why...
So you refuse to answer the question. You know how many are rapists? Do you know how many are rapists? This is a question. You're a lawyer. You know how to answer questions. Of the 600,000, do you know how many of them were rapists?
Senator, this is why
the answer is no. Let me ask you this. Do you know how many of them are terrorists? And I don't want to, Senator, here's my lecture on this. Do you know how many of the 600,000 gotaways were terrorists? Yes or no?
Senator, we are focused on the
You refuse to answer that as well. What's the result of massive gotaways? Well, one of the results is drug overdoses. And we now have, last year, over 100,000 overdoses who died, the majority from Chinese fentanyl streaming across the border. Now, you told Senator Cornyn you care, but look what has happened under your policy. When you open up the border to the worst illegal immigration in our nation's history, people die. You claim you care. Mr. Secretary, that is a lie. You know, some months ago, Karine Jean-Pierre stood up at a White House briefing and said, people are not just walking across the border. Was she telling the truth?
Senator, you are
Was she telling the truth?
so profoundly disrespecting.
Was she telling the truth?
22 years
okay,
of government service.
You get to answer questions. You don't get to give speeches.
Senator, I served as a federal prosecutor.
All right, you're refusing to answer. If you look at, she was lying. And she was not lying on her own. She was lying on behalf of the President of the United States. Now, the photograph of people walking. She was lying on behalf of the President of the United States. This is a photograph from just one day along the Rio Grande of hundreds of thousands of people walking across the border. You have allowed this to happen. The photograph that was before, what are these wristbands?
I don't know what they are.
You
Senator.
don't know. Has been skyrocketing in this city. In the past 12 months, overall crime is up 25% in D.C. Car theft has increased 110% in D.C. And homicides have increased 30%. Who in their right mind looks to those rising crime rates and says the answer is to lower the penalties for violent crime? And D.C.'s spike in crime is hardly confined to the last 12 months. In 2021, the number of murders in D.C. was the highest it's been since 2003. The mayor of D.C., a Democrat, vetoed the city council's decision to rewrite the criminal code, saying, quote, anytime there's a policy that reduces penalties, I think it sends the wrong message. Unfortunately, the Democrats on the city council in D.C. overrode her veto. Time and time again, we've seen Democrats in major cities reducing penalties for crime, and we've seen, as a result, crime spiking. We've seen this in San Francisco. We've seen this in Los Angeles. We've seen this in Portland. We've seen this in Boston. We've seen this in Philadelphia. We've seen this in New York. We've seen this in St. Louis. We've seen this in Chicago. Crime is spiking in D.C., and it is incredibly harmful to the men and women and children who live in D.C. to be lowering the penalties for violent crime. That's why I'm proud to support the resolution to disapprove of the D.C. City Council's decision, and I thank my friend from Tennessee for his leadership in bringing this resolution. This has already passed the House, and I believe it will pass the Senate as well. And despite being soft on crime his entire presidency, President Biden has said he will sign it if it passes the Senate. Now, that's remarkable, given Biden's record on crime. That's remarkable, given that Biden has nominated not one, not two, but three of the leading advocates of abolishing the police to senior positions at the Department of Justice. And I'm sorry to say, every Democrat in this chamber voted to confirm not one, not two, but all three of those advocates of abolishing the police to senior positions in the Department of Justice. One of those was a George Soros-backed prosecutor in Massachusetts who, like the D.C. City Council, put out a list of crimes that she would not allow her prosecutors to prosecute, endangering the citizens she was charged to protect. What was her reward for refusing to prosecute violent criminals? President Biden nominated her to be the U.S. Attorney for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and every Senate Democrat voted to confirm her as the U.S. Attorney, the chief federal prosecutor in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Now, once President Biden said he would sign this bill, the political pressure it has put on the D.C. City Council has had enormous impact. This week, the council tried to withdraw the legislation. Never mind, was their response. But simply withdrawing a bill doesn't permanently get rid of it under the Home Rule Act, which allows Congress to review legislation that comes out of the D.C. City Council. To permanently stop the D.C. Council's harmful bill, Congress should proceed and pass the resolution of disapproval, and President Biden should follow through on his commitment to sign it. A recent poll found that 77% of Americans believe that violent crime is a major problem. Democrats, tragically, have been soft on crime for years, and crime has surged as a result. At the end of the day, it's not complicated. If you let violent criminals go,
As I say often, the way at DEA, we are the only single mission federal law enforcement agency committed to narcotics and to stopping the global supply chain. We play offense, and so we're tracking these cartels worldwide and across our
So is that a yes? We've got limited time.
DHS's responsibility is to maintain the southern border and the ports of entry. Our investigations do tell us that the vast majority of fentanyl is coming in the ports of entry, two particularly in California and two in Arizona.
So is that a yes, that you would agree that CBP officers, both on the southern border and the ports of entry, play a critical role in interdicting drugs?
Yes, Senator. I believe it's a DHS responsibility, and it's a critical one.
So if we decided to cut the number of Border Patrol agents dramatically, let's say in half, would you agree that would hurt our efforts to stop illegal drugs?
Senator, I would defer some of this to the Department of Homeland Security and Secretary Mayorkas.
You're not willing to answer that question?
But here's what I would say about this. We believe that DHS plays vital defense.
Okay, those are talking points. Would cutting the number of CBP agents in half hurt our ability to stop drugs? Yes or no?
Senator, I believe it would.
Okay. That's effectively what's happened under the Biden administration. Because right now today, more than half of the CBP agents are engaged in housekeeping and chauffeurs and babysitting of the 5.5 million illegal aliens who have crossed the border. They're not on the border. They're not at the ports of entry. They are instead processing the highest rate of illegal immigration in history. Now, Democrat members of Congress have the remarkable claim that the open borders under Joe Biden has no impact on the record fentanyl and drugs that are flooding across our borders. Between October 2021 and September 2022, one CBP source estimated there were 364,000 gotaways, people that ran away at the southern border. Another Border Patrol officials put the number of gotaways at 1.2 million. Gotaways can vary from terrorists on the terror watch list. In fiscal year 2022, 98 people on the terror watch list were encountered at the southern border that we know of. Or they can be drug dealers carrying drugs. Is that correct?
Senator, I'm going to defer questions on the border and the ports of entry to the Department of Homeland Security.
So the DEA has no view on whether drug dealers crossing the border carry drugs?
Senator, as I said, from our investigations, what we see is that the majority of fentanyl
I didn't ask the majority. I said drug dealers and gotaways are carrying drugs, many of them.
Senator, what we see is mostly what we see is mostly tractor trailers and personal vehicles.
All right, so you're sticking to the talking points closely, and congratulations, it's the Democrat talking points, that the open borders don't matter, that 328,000 or 1.2 million gotaways don't matter. We had 100,000 people die last year of drug overdoses. My sister died of a drug overdose just over a decade ago. This is a crisis, but it is a man-made crisis. This administration made a conscious political decision to open the borders. And one of the results is they have turned Mexican drug cartels into multi-billionaires. In 2018, the amount of money cartels made from human trafficking, according to the New York Times, was $500 million. Now, just from human trafficking, the cartels are making $13 billion a year. Again, according to the New York Times, that's a 2,600% increase. Administrator Milgram, the single best thing that happened to Mexican drug cartels in history was Joe Biden becoming president, opening the border, and making tens of billions of dollars for these vicious criminals. In your judgment, is it a good thing that these cartels now have tens of billions of dollars from human trafficking and drug trafficking?
Senator Cruz, I really appreciate the opportunity to